It was a reboot. We stayed.
Okay, thank you for your patience. We're going to get started here shortly. We just had a small technical issue. Are we ready now? Okay, I'd like to call this evening's meeting to order, and we will take a roll call. Some of our commissioners are absent. Can we call the roll?
We have Chair Dalton and Commissioners Whitaker and Prendergast. Absent are Sherrod and Ryan.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd like to join me. Okay, just briefly before we jump into oral communications, I'd like to, there's some new faces up here, and I'd like to welcome Megan Openshaw as the new Assistant Director of Planning at the City of Encinitas. So you'll be seeing a lot more of us, I'm sure, and thanks for joining us tonight. With that, we'll move on to oral communications. Oral communications are an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Each person will be given 3 minutes. And are there any speaker slips?
I have none.
Okay. Seeing nobody in the audience, I'll move on to changes to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. Moving to the consent calendar. The consent calendar are items that are considered routine in nature and are voted on as one block. Tonight there are a handful of items on the consent calendar. Can I get a motion regarding the consent calendar?
A motion to approve.
Has anybody pulled a consent? No?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. A motion and a second. I'll call the vote. There we go. All right, that motion passes. The consent calendar is approved. And we'll move on to item 8A. Item 8A is called the Santa Fe Subdivision Project, case number multi-43982021. Before we get to the staff presentation, are there any disclosures to make regarding this project?
I'll disclose that I looked at some aerial maps as well as some street view maps.
Okay.
That's it.
I drove by it this afternoon and pretty familiar with it. My daughter went to SDA, so been a lot of drive-bys.
Okay. And I've been by it several times. I live outside of the 1,000 square foot. I think I asked the staff earlier today to confirm that. So there's no conflict. I have no interest or connection to the project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christina Bustamante, staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission, members of the public. My name is Christina. I'm a senior planner here, and I'll be presenting this project to you. Okay, the project site is located on the south side of Santa Fe Drive and adjacent to San Diego High School Academy to the north. Oh, I'm not presenting to you, am I? Here we are. Thank you. All right. Windsor Road to the east, Munavar Road to the south, McKinnon Avenue to the west. Vehicular and pedestrian access would be provided from Santa Fe Drive. The project site is within the residential R8 zone. The surrounding property to the north is within the public, semi-public zone, and properties to the east, west, and south are within the residential 8 zone. The project proposes demolishing all existing structures on site and to construct a 51-unit residential subdivision on a 5.2-acre site utilizing the California State Density Bonus Law. The proposed project consists of 35 single-family units and 16 attached single-family units. 5 of the 51 residential units would be designated for sale for very low-income qualifying households. The affordable units would be deed restricted in perpetuity to meet the density bonus law requirements and the city's inclusionary housing requirements. The project includes several plan types that provide 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units with 1 and 2-car garages. The project would provide access from Santa Fe Drive. The driveway alignment of access road would align with the driveway of the San Diego High School parking lot driveway. The circulation within the project is designed with a loop private street. There's no access from the project to Munavar Road. The project includes conditions of approval that require public improvements, which includes a 4-leg signalized intersection at the project driveway and Santa Fe Drive aligning the driveway at San Diego Academy High School, pedestrian and public easements for private streets. The discretionary permits that are requested with this project include a density bonus permit, a design review permit, a coastal development permit, and there we are, and an ISM&D. So again, the applicable regulations to this project are the municipal code, the R8 development code standards. The project is also subject to the city objective design guidelines and standards and the state density bonus law. And then these are just images of the site as it's existing out there. And so there's some grassy field areas, there's an existing church and parking lot out there. There is a capital improvement project that is located adjacent to the project that is on Santa Fe Drive. The Santa Fe Drive corridor improvements stretch for a longer length than just this frontage. It is not part of this particular project for housing, and so just wanted to touch that it is adjacent, and this project will coordinate with that CIP project, but they are separate. Okay, so within the city of Encinitas, the threshold for acceptable operating conditions for signalized and unsignalized intersections and roadway segments is level of service of D or better. 3 intersections were studied in this assessment, and they are listed here, and all 3 intersections operate at a level of service of B or better. The segment of Santa Fe Drive fronting the project site operates at a level of C. With the existing conditions plus the project, the 3 intersections would operate at level of service B or better, and the segment of Santa Fe Drive fronting the project would continue to operate at a level of C. The project is expected to operate at an acceptable level of service. The project driveway would align with the San Diego High School driveway, and existing pedestrian signal would be modified to a 4-leg signalized intersection and is expected to operate at an acceptable level of service. The project was found to be consistent with the city general plan policies. The applicant is proposing to provide 5 very low income units, and therefore pursuant to the state density bonus law, the city is required to grant up to 2 incentives or concessions and an unlimited amount of waivers. Using this density bonus, the project can develop up to 59 residential units on the project site. The project proposes 51 residential units, which is less than the 59 residential units allowed to be constructed. And then, let's see, the state density bonus law allows for affordable units provided to be deed restricted for 55 years. However, this project is using the 5 very low affordable units to also qualify for both the state density bonus law and the city's affordable housing standards. The city's affordable housing standards require the qualifying affordable units to remain affordable to the designated income group in perpetuity. As a result, the project has been conditioned with the standard condition of approval H02 to require that the 5 proposed very low affordable units shall be permanently reserved for qualifying very low income households. The project is requesting to utilize the state density bonus law ratios for determining residential parking requirements for the single-family dwelling units. And pursuant to the state density bonus law, the city may not require more than the state density bonus law. And the project is required to provide 73 off-street parking spaces according to that state density bonus law ratios. The project is providing 128 parking spaces. And so if you'll look on the table that's on the screen there, the residential parking per the city's local municipal code would require 125 parking spaces. This project is proposing 128, so it's exceeding both the state requirements and the city local requirements. So I thought that might be good to point out there. Okay, so on to incentives and concessions. So a housing development consisting of 5 or more dwelling units may propose a density bonus in accordance with the state density bonus law. Projects that qualify for that are also allowed for concessions. And a concession pursuant to the state density bonus law is defined as a reduction in site development standards or a modification of zoning code or architectural design requirements, such as a reduction in setback, minimum square footage requirements, approval of mixed-use zoning. Incentives or concessions which actually result in identifiable and actual cost reductions. No incentives or concessions were requested as a result of this project. However, 10 waivers are requested, and we'll go over those. Alrighty, there is a waiver to the private road standards, and so per the City of Encinitas Municipal Code, street dedications, any road serving more than 10 lots shall be a public road built to required public road standards. This code section indicates that private streets may only be established where development creates a cul-de-sac street serving 10 or less lots. The project is requesting a waiver to use the private road standards in lieu of the public road standards for the proposed internal access and within the subdivision. More specifically, the request includes a reduction in the required paved width and overall right-of-way width for an urban local street as defined in the public road standards. The overall right-of-way width for an urban local public street is 56 feet with a paved width of 36 feet to facilitate on-street parking on both sides of the street. However, the project provides a minimum of 20 feet with a private road with no on-street parking on either side of the street in accordance with the requirements of the fire marshal and as defined in Encinitas Municipal Code for roads serving only residential dwellings that are not within a very high fire severity zone. And then as mentioned before, there's a number of waivers that are requested with this project. And so this slide here is just kind of listing very high level the reductions to the development standards, such as the lot size, lot depth, lot width, the setbacks, the lot coverage, and FAR. And if we'd like to go into any of those in more detail, we can after the presentation. And so this project is requesting to waive the design standard for guidelines which states that the access shall be taken from the street, side street or alleys when side streets or alleys are located adjacent to the project and meet access requirements. A waiver is being requested to allow the project's primary access off Santa Fe Drive instead of Maneuver Road. And then the project is required to comply with Encinitas Municipal Code Section 30, landscaping requirements, and Municipal Code Section Chapter 2326, which is the water efficient landscape regulations, and the project will provide at least 50% of the landscape area with native plants. The Climate Action Plan requires that existing trees to be removed or replaced at a 1-to-1 ratio. The project would remove 64 existing trees on site and would be providing 210 trees complying with the Encinitas Municipal Code as well as the Climate Action Plan. And then this graphic here, the green that's highlighting here on the plan is just to highlight there it is a common outdoor areas. One of them is a play area. The other one is a dog park. And then these are the elevations of the units that will be out there. This is Unit A and the 4 sides that are out there. This is type B and B2 and the four-sided elevations. This is both C and D. And then this one is C2 and D, which I think only happens in one place on this particular site plan. And then this particular project is asking for a coastal development permit, which is covering the project because it's located in the coastal zone. It's also covering a temporary construction trailer if they need it, and to determine compliance with the city's local coastal program. And so the project was in compliance with the Encinitas Municipal Code and the general plan. Therefore, the project was found to be in compliance with the local coastal program. Okay, in accordance with Encinitas Municipal Code Section 230610, Citizen Participation Program meeting was held for the project on April 6, 2021 at 6 p.m. Due to the COVID pandemic at that time. Wow, that's a whole thing, sorry. Due to the COVID pandemic safety precautions at the time, the meeting was held virtually through Zoom. All property owners and occupants within a 500-foot radius of the project site were notified. There were 30 participants during the meeting. Participants commented on the green space, density, compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, coordination with Santa Fe Drive, capital improvement project, and traffic. During the citizen participation program, public comments were received to indicate that an access point from Munavar Road was not desirable. The applicant prepared responses to the comments received, included them in the report, and addressed them as much as possible into the plans. And 2 comments were received since the public notice for this public hearing occurred. One respondent was expressing discontent for the CIP project that's adjacent to this residential project. The other one was in support of the project. Okay. So pursuant to the Environmental Quality Act, an environmental initial study was conducted which determined that the proposed project may have a significant environmental impacts related to biological resources, cultural resources, geology, noise, and tribal cultural resources. In consideration of these environmental effects, a mitigated negative declaration and mitigated monitoring reporting program has been prepared for the proposed project by Recon Environmental, Inc. on behalf of the city as the lead agency. An MND is essentially a statement that the project will not have a significant environmental impact and that such impacts can be mitigated to less than significant through specific measures. The project with incorporation of these specific mitigation measures avoids or mitigates the potential significant environmental impacts to the below established levels of significance, and an environmental impact report is not required. The final mitigated negative declarations prepared for this project includes the comments that were received and the responses to those comments that are part of this administrative record. And then this is just a list of the technical studies that were completed with that initial study and mitigated negative declaration. Copies of these studies are included with the ISM&D, which can be looked at further at a later time. Let's see. Okay. So then the California State Density Bonus Law allows for projects to exceed the maximum allowable density in a zone if the project can demonstrate that it provides qualifying affordable residential units. When a project provides the qualifying affordable units, it is then eligible for waivers and incentives that can be used towards deviating from the local development standards as described in the zoning codes. However, a local municipality can deny a waiver if the proposed project is contrary to state or federal law or would have an adverse impact upon health or safety or have an adverse impact on any real property that is listed in the California Register of Historic Resources. If a project can demonstrate compliance with the California State Density Bonus Law, then municipalities are not able to deny the approval of the project. In the event that the project is found to be wrongfully denied, the city is at risk of the California Department of Housing and Community Development Department decertifying the housing element of the general plan, and then developers would be able to utilize the builder's remedy of the California Government Code, which allows builders to propose projects that can apply directly to building permits and restricts the local municipality to regulating development with objective development standards only. In closing, staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the resolution approving the planning applications and adopt the CEQA findings. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time. I am available for questions. There's several other people that are also available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the staff for clarification?
Thank you for the report. I first wanted to ask if we could get any additional detail about the street project that's adjacent to this.
Sure. So the CIP project that's located on Santa Fe is not part of this particular scope of work. This particular scope of work in the discretionary permits is for the housing development project. But is there something specific that you would like about the CIP project?
I am just concerned that where this project is laid out it currently doesn't match up with the streetscape. It's going to be needed to be modified as it currently exists. But we also know that project is continuing in its development.
Sure. Okay, so I can address that.
Thank you.
So the project as designed right now today has taken into effect the way that the design is out there and the way that the plans were approved for that CIP project. Understanding that that is currently in flux, it has not landed on a revised plan yet for that CIP project. And so this particular project has conditions of approval that are flexible enough that are saying that this project, the residential one, will essentially connect to the public improvements that are on Santa Fe. And so any changes that happen between now in the discretionary permit phase to when that CIP project finally gets a approved plan and starts to develop, we will be able to address that during the construction documents. Does that help?
That was helpful. Thank you. If I could ask further, so a stoplight is proposed as part of this project.
That's correct.
I'm just kind of scratching my head. I don't really understand how it kind of connects up to that particular location, considering there's a bus stop there now.
Sure. So for that, I'm going to defer to either Matt in CIP or Matt in traffic. They just happen to both be named Matt, but they're both here.
Good evening. Matt Wodelski. I'm the principal engineer for the capital improvements section. Yes, correct. As we said now, currently there is a bus stop where the four-way intersection is proposed to go. As this development came forward and as the CIP project progressed forward, we realized that the ultimate condition would be a four-way traffic signal here with the school to the north and this development to the south. Because the CIP project was constructed before this development, the bus stop had to go in the space it is now because that was the opening between the two existing driveways. But in the final condition, when the traffic signal gets constructed, the bus stop will have to be relocated away from where the four-way intersection will be.
Understood. Thank you. If I could pivot now over to the design standards. I was curious, we were provided with an outline of the point scoring. And I was curious, how does the scoring break down for each category? Like how are the numbers evaluated? For example, if there's 4 points, you've got 5 options. And how does the categorization break down for selecting between those?
Give me just a moment here. So this was the Objective Design Standard Scorecard for architectural elements specifically. And so on the left there, you'll see in that category describe things like articulation, materials, colors, those sorts of things. And so that will go here on the left. It will say, okay, here's the point value on the far right column there. That is what could be possible, like the maximum amount if you were able to hit everything in each one of those categories. And then there in the green column, kind of sandwiched in between the two, is what this project is providing. And so this project, the way that the numbering system is working is that it either provides all of those things in that column there in the left, or it doesn't get the points at all. So the points that are there are because they've satisfied that particular category. Does that help?
I have a similar question, and so what you're saying is there is no partial points ever given.
Correct.
So
Oh, it's 0 or no,
it's,
or the full point.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
So along those lines, if one of the various types doesn't meet the design guidelines, say type A or B or C, I think you gave us letters, does one unit disqualify that category, or is it a la carte, or you take it as a whole, like they've done enough articulation on enough or 51% of the units to get the points?
Got it. So I think the intent of it is to evaluate the project as a whole. That'll be especially true when you get into landscaping, that you're looking at the whole project, not individual lots. And so this is kind of similar.
any other questions, Brent? Bob?
Yeah, I want to follow up on Commissioner Whitaker's question on the CIP issue. So, from my understanding, the CIP is in transition or a state of flux at the moment. So how can we approve a project that's before us tonight if a lot of the conditions associated with the project will be determined later based on how the city decides to finalize the CIP? Shouldn't we have that information today in order to properly evaluate the project before us?
Yes, so with that, it's a valid concern. I'm sure other people may have similar concerns. And so, again, I'll reiterate what I said earlier, is that there is a condition of approval in the project that allows for enough flexibility there that they're going to coordinate and they're going to connect with whatever does end up being out there. And so that will be addressed during construction documents. So if there needs to be adjustments and things that happen to this project as a result, those will be captured in either their grading or building permit. So does that help?
It answers the question, but it doesn't make me comfortable that a project before us is in flux in terms of its only ingress and egress to a street that's not finalized in terms of what it's going to look like. Plus, it's across the street from a high school, which has its own set of issues in terms of ingress and egress. So I understand you're saying that there's flexibility, but I don't know what it's going to look like. And the project before me is asking for approvals for a certain kind of ingress and egress with a stoplight. And I don't know what the street's going to look like, so I don't know if it's going to be exactly what I'm approving or disapproving tonight.
Okay, I could understand that. I do maybe think back to the slide where we said, hey, there's a specific level of service that the city holds to. And so as they're going through to update their designs that are out there, that's the level that they're going to keep it at. And so this particular project has been designed in such a way that it's also holding to that threshold. So as things change and morph, they will continue to hold to the city's minimum standard, if not exceed that. So does that maybe help solve some of that heartache?
No.
Okay.
And, and one of the waivers for the project is, not conforming to the city's code for street width. They're asking for private roads. And so private road leads to an ingress and egress for 51 houses at an intersection that I don't know if it's going to be that intersection at the end of the day. So, yeah, it does concern me that we have a waiver for a street. So it's going to be more narrow to get in and out, and I don't know what that's going to look like because I don't know what the road it's going to enter and it's going to exit into is going to look like across from, 2,500 high school students. So I'm just commenting more on my opinion rather than the facts. You're telling me the facts are you will maintain control by holding up a grading permit for them if it's not compliant. But that's not in my control. It's in staff's control at the grading permit level or the construction level.
Got it.
There may be a deliberation part of this.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you know,
Yes,
Yeah.
well, that was the question.
the
for
staff's
staff.
try to clarify the
Sure.
procedure
And she
for
did-
you.
And she did.
Okay. Okay, just to clarify one thing, the CIP project is funded and done by the city, right? The developer here is not asked to improve anything out on the right-of-way.
They are making some improvements out there. I'm going to defer. Matt's jumping in here.
Yeah, again, the location of where the intersection will be the same. And again, the current mid-block crossing will be part of a four-way traffic signalized intersection. The thing that would be required for the developer to change is where the bus stop is for eastbound traffic. Obviously, that has to be relocated because that is exactly across the street from the driveway to the school. So that is the one condition the developer would have to do. But as far as talk that has been going about changing reverse angle parking to parallel parking, doing protected intersections at each end, the developer is not involved with any of that work.
Thank you.
In the map, you showed various intersections that were circled. Was there any discussion to the east for Evergreen, the impact of the 51 units on the Evergreen intersection?
Give me just a moment here. I'm pulling up the slide. Okay, so I think this is the one that we're
Yeah.
talking about. And so these are the three intersections, the Nardo and McKinnon,
Right.
which is to the west of the project site, and then the intersection between the driveway of the project to the driveway of the parking lot at the high school, and then there for Bonita and Windsor Road and Santa Fe Road, so that intersection as well. So those three are what were covered under the traffic study. To my knowledge, the Evergreen intersection was not included in the traffic study.
Any reason why not?
I would have to defer to Matt in traffic, if you don't mind.
Sure. So Matthew Edgeworth, traffic engineer. So the threshold for analysis would be the 50 peak hour trips. Evergreen and Santa Fe Drive didn't meet that 50 peak hour trip threshold based off of the project's average daily trip and its trip distribution.
Okay, so if this intersection just to the west qualifies for the 50, and you're saying that basically not enough cars are going westbound in the morning at peak time to go to the high school, but yet one block to the west is, knowing also that at Lake you can get to Birmingham and there's an ingress and egress to the freeway on Birmingham you get to off of Lake. So I guess the question is, one block west or one intersection to the west does not hit 50, but one intersection to the west does?
So what the traffic study takes into account is the trip distribution. So you do have turns along those two intersections. So not everyone in the mornings are heading to the freeway. There are some people who might be turning south onto McKinnon, north onto Bonita. So that's where it kind of factors in.
And what time of day did you
During peak
collect those?
hours. So we take a look at AM peak hour, or peak period, I should say. So that's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then PM peak hour, which is between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m.
And when were those studies taken?
So the traffic counts were collected in 2023. So it was prior to the construction start of the Santa Fe CIP project.
Okay, and it was after COVID and school was starting up again in place?
Correct. I believe it was the last week of August. So school was in session when the traffic counts were taken.
Last week of August. When does school start?
I believe either the week before or the last week of August.
Okay, in 2023, the last week of August.
I did confirm with the school calendar back in 2023, and school was in session when the traffic counts were collected.
Okay. Mid-month it starts. Mid-month, all right. It's been a while. All right. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay.
I got some other ones, but I'll wait.
You have more for the staff
gotta
or
get-
more for later?
More for staff, if you don't.
I don't have anything for staff.
Okay. Let me just unlock. Okay. So one question I had was the total number of waivers are 10. Can you name another project in the city that has asked for as many waivers?
We have a number of projects that have asked for waivers. I don't have off the top of my head how many to each one. But as stated earlier, they are allowed an unlimited amount of waivers. And so the fact that they've asked for 10, they are allowed to do so.
No, I was just curious if any other housing density bonus project had asked for as many as 10, and I couldn't recall, so I thought I would just check with you.
Understood.
What would the zoning have been? So without the state density bonus laws, it would have been R8. And is that calculated on the 5 acres or the 4 acres? Is it net versus, back to the net versus gross question?
Yeah, so our affordable housing inclusionary, that is within our Encinitas municipal code. For that calculation, we are using net acres. For the state and the density bonus, they're using gross. And so that's the difference between the two.
So the calculation under R8 at 5 acres gives us the 59 that's noted?
Yeah, so I think what
5.2.
you're asking for is the breakdown to see like the numbers and how it became 59 units. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were,
Yeah.
in the staff report, it kind of went back and forth between 40 units, which is 8 times 5, versus the higher units. And we can go to, but just maybe an overview of how that calculation was made.
Your question is essentially, if they had not used density bonus,
How many units
you
could
would,
they have built?
applying the city's standard, they would have used, in the city's case, net gross, or net lot area,
And then 4 times
which is, say, 4 acres, times whatever the R,
8 is, so
8.
that's 32 units.
so
And
that would equate to 32 units.
So under the current municipal code under our, not using density bonus law, so using the Encinitas municipal code, 4 acres net at the 8 units, and our inclusionary requirement is 15%?
15.
So 15% of 32 is,
Sorry, I'm looking for
4.
the table here that
so by
breaks all
density,
this
so
down.
I guess just making sure that my math is correct. So we're at 32 units, they're proposing 51, and we're getting 1 extra unit. And with that, we have 10 waivers.
There we are. Found it. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. There we
I'm just trying to
are.
understand the impact of the density bonus law calculations on the total project.
Sure. Okay. So this particular sheet is part of the density bonus report, and it lays out the math a little bit better than I could just explain figuratively. So what you were asking before is, okay, the property is 5.2 gross acres times the 8 dwelling units per acre. That gives us 41.6 dwelling units per acre, which rounds up to 42. So that's what it would have been allowed to develop to if it were just kept at city standard. So there's that. Then you kind of go through and start to walk through how that reflects in relation to amount of units over that, right? And so this calculation here, the first part is just saying, here's the affordable units that you would be required to provide. So they're saying, okay, proposed very low affordable, 12% in order to qualify for the waivers, incentives, all that. And so the 12% times the 42 units that we calculated earlier is the 5.4. And so they're saying, okay, the 5 units is what they're giving at very low affordable in order to qualify for all of those waivers and incentives and things. And then if you continue down further here in this report, they go into how they've calculated other things. I think this is, Let me look at it a little bit better. This is not quite the calculation I'm looking for the other part. So the other part of it is they take the density that's there, they multiply it by, I think it's a 38.6% or something like that. It's in the report. And it comes out with a number. That number they can then add to this density here of 42 units, which brings it to the 59 that they could have maxed out their density bonus, but they did not. They chose to do 51 units instead. Does that help walk through the math a little bit?
Yeah, it walks through, but I guess I'm just trying to compare the staff report versus the city code. It's not a debate, I'm just asking.
Yeah, but be careful. I mean, there's a state law in play here that we don't get to change, right?
Understand.
So, you know, they can use the state density bonus law and that becomes a fact, right? We don't get to, other than for you to understand what the difference is.
I'm just trying to
between
understand
the
the difference between our code and what we're getting. As a city, I understand the state density bonus laws as well as I can, and we have counsel here also. But what I'm hearing is, under the city code, they would have given us 5 units on the net acreage, and we're getting 5 units on 51,
Yeah,
and they're
the
getting
gross
10
is-
waivers. So that's just my understanding of the situation. I'm just going to clarify that with staff.
If I could clarify one thing on the screen you just had, and it may be related to what you're saying, Bob.
There you
There is a base density of 5.03 units, and I thought under state density bonus law, every fraction is rounded up to the next whole unit.
You're
So
correct.
wouldn't that be 6 units set aside?
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
And we're getting 5.
Well, until we correct something,
Right.
right? I mean,
Okay, well, that's, I'm working on just the reports that we have, and I was just trying to,
I guess
Better
that will
understand.
be a topic of conversation here as we move into the deliberations is that calculation correct? At 5.03, it should be 6 affordable units being set aside, and it currently is proposing only to set aside 5.
Yeah, that I'll need to look into a little bit more, because I think as it was tracking right now, we had the understanding that it was 5. And so if it's different than that, that's something to look at.
Okay.
did this, I looked at the comments from 2021. Did the school district comment at all?
They did not.
They did not?
No, but if you're asking if they could facilitate, they do provide facility availability forms as part of their application, and so the school district has to sign off, and they did.
They did. Okay. Let's see, I'm just going, my notes won't be too much longer. Is there, in the staff report, or is there anywhere where there's a map of all the different waivers? I think on another project, we had an aerial image, and in that image, it identified where the various waivers were. Oh, there it is. This has
Yes,
all.
I think this might be the map that you're referring to that you've seen in other projects. This is the similarity to that. I apologize, maybe it's looking difficult to read. Do you need me to make it bigger?
No, I think that's fine.
You
I
can
think.
read it? Okay.
So in the table, just to make sure I was clear, there are some waivers where we have a minimum. I think there was a chart that had all the various setbacks, and then it was in gray. It looks to me as if the applicant is looking to almost go to a 0 lot line on a couple of the lots. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It's not just a couple of them, it's a majority of them. Hold on, let me go to a slide there. I can pull up a set of plans for you. We can
Just about
chat.
everyone I see, they're all 0
Yeah.
until you get down here.
Setback, I saw
Oh,
2
no,
feet,
these are
7
0.
feet.
These are all 0. Except for these.
Yeah.
But they're duplexes too.
Okay, so this is essentially the cover page of the plans. This will be a helpful space to navigate through what we're talking about. And so what you were asking is, hey, you're asking for a relief to 0 lot line in some of these, it's like, well, actually, it's much more than that, right? The single-family attached units, all of these ones in blue and green, they're essentially at a zero lot line, right? Because they're sharing a wall, so there's that. And then all the units here in yellow and orange and red, they are hugging to one lot line and leaving the other side available for a side yard. And so, and maybe I can zoom in a little bit too to help see that. So like at the bottom here, for example, if we were to look at these first lots, lot 1 through 6, you can see that they're shifted to hug to one side property line, and then the other side is open for a side yard.
So in the staff report on one of the charts, it basically shows each lot, and there's gray and there's white. I probably should have brought it up first, but in that, it talks about all the setbacks for each lot and the waivers that they're asking for each one. In essence, I think it's on page, of the staff report, on page 11.
Let's see, your page 11 is a little bit different than my page 11. Give me just a moment.
11 of the
Okay, it's the long
PDF.
one. Okay, yeah, here we are.
So I think this is a good one, just kind of, I like this chart, so thank you for putting it in.
Sure. Is this the chart that you're talking about, the whole one, the big one? Yeah.
So,
Okay.
it says across the top, width, for instance, the second column, the width is, I guess by code, 60 feet. And lot 1 is 44 and all the way down. And then going over to, say, side yard setback, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 column or 7th column over. The side yard setback should be 5, and they're all 0 on those. So areas in gray, it looks like, have identified as all the areas where a waiver is required to be able to approve, to be able to do this development. Just clarifying that.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
basically every lot in the project cannot be completed per the applicant unless they get all of these waivers as designed.
Yes, as it's designed today, that is correct. Your understanding is correct.
Okay. And also, the applicant did not ask for any financial concessions, and I think one of the ones we have seen in the past is a waiver for undergrounding the utilities. They've not asked for any concessions in this case.
You're correct.
Tonight's resolution, are we also approving site development guidelines? Is that in tonight's, or does that come back to us? I'm thinking of La Costa 48, where we approved things and
No,
then it came back.
This is all the architecture.
Everything.
You've been given floor plans and elevations for.
Soup to nuts.
Yeah.
Okay. And the fire department, I was asking about the roads. So the private road widths, is there an aerial or somewhere in the site plans that you can show the roads? I just want to understand. That's fine.
Here we are. So this is the site plan here. We can
Yeah.
go back to see what that was. And so where the private road standards was, or rather the public road standards was 36 to allow for parking alongside the street.
Right.
The plan here that I'm reading, it looks like it says 24. And so they are not allowing on-street parking along that road because of the width.
Right.
But it has been found in compliance with the Encinitas municipal code as well as with the fire marshal. And so this particular design is able to facilitate, let's say, emergency vehicles because of the width and because it's a looped design. So they can just drive through and continue going rather than having to maneuver in different ways.
Well, they'll have to maneuver at a Y-turn at the end of on the east end of the site. It's a dead end.
If they need to, yeah.
If they need to. And if anybody parks along, if a visitor, and that's another kind of question based on the understanding is where do visitors park? And if a visitor happens to park along the side of the road in the day of an emergency, how does a fire truck or an emergency vehicle get through that day?
Got it. So from what I understand in looking at this floor plan, the vehicles, the guest vehicles are not supposed to park on the street, on the sides of the street here. And so there are a couple places where guest parking spaces have been allotted, like say, for example, down here where it says interior street 3, and then there's a couple of spaces there between lot 15 and lot 22 to accommodate folks. And so it's not encroaching into that pathway that would be necessary for an emergency vehicle. And I believe the emergency vehicle requires a minimum width of 20. And so this is 24. And so they are meeting that standard.
So for the 51 units, there are 4 guest parking spots.
Incorrect. There are 16. So there's a couple down here. There's some up here by the open space area, if you will. So there's a couple of them there that I can see. And then in addition to that, some of these lots are able to accommodate additional parking within the driveway as well. And so between the driveways, the guest parking spaces, and the parking spaces that are within these garages, they are adequately parked and not encroaching into the required roadway to provide emergency vehicle access.
And so that ratio of off-street parking they are consistent with the city code for private roads. So this development meets off-street parking requirements?
For parking requirements, yes. And so what's interesting, or rather to note about that, is there's the city requirements for parking ratios. There's that. And then separate from that is the state density bonus law parking ratios. And so this particular project has been able to meet both. So it's exceeded the state requirements as well as the city requirements for parking.
I think the state requirements were only 73 stalls for 51 units, right?
Correct.
And so they're doing 128 per the chart.
Correct.
I think the city minimum was 123.
125, something like that.
125, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. Thank you. That was very well done. Thanks, guys.
I had a hard time finding where the affordable units are on the site. Is there a diagram or a list of lot numbers that indicate which units are the affordable units?
Oh, yes. I don't know that I have it quite in a site plan, but I did have it. Give me a moment.
A list of numbers would work too.
Here we go. Okay, so this is a slide that we didn't go over. It was just a backup slide for me. But this table, I think, helps indicate.
We're not seeing it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for that. There you go. Now you can see it. All right, so this particular table here is indicating that lot 16 is an affordable unit, lot 33, lot 39, 40, 43, and 51, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, did I do that wrong? I did. That's too many. Two, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Okay. This one's the corrected one. Sorry about that. So lot 16, lot 33, lot 38, lot 40, and lot 50.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Was there any clarification on the rounding of the density?
Yes, so just a quick point of clarification. So I think where the confusion comes in is when you do the calculations, if you don't actually round up the numbers prior to doing the calculations, so typically when you're going through the numbers, if you take the 8 dwelling units per, in the gross acres, and you multiply that basically 8 times 5.2, you get 41.6. Then you multiply 41.6 times 0.12, which is 12%, and that actually gives you 4.99. So when you round up, that's where the 5 units come from. So where the report actually showed you when I was taking a look where there was a little bit of conflict is that it was, for some reason, showing that they were rounding up to 42 and then doing the calculations. However, when you're doing the calculations, you start with the 41.6 and you go from there, and then at the end result, you look at that number and round up. And so that's why we have 5 units.
I thought the state code had a passage that said at every step in the equation, the rounding happened.
It does talk about any fractional requirements being rounded up, so I could take a deeper look at that prior to that. But in terms of what I was looking at, the plans and the calculations that the applicant provided, that was where that calculation comes from.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you for all those answers. I am going to turn it over to the applicant, if you'd like to speak to the commission. And what, I think we give the applicant 10 minutes? That's even better.
Okay, thank you for coming to 845 Santa Fe Drive. Big thank you to the commissioners. This has been some projects since 2020. I think we've outlasted the whole planning commission, the whole planning department, and the whole engineering department. But big thanks to Christina, who has come in the last 2 years or so and really assisted with this project. I think we have a much stronger project now that we're happy to bring forth today. Can I do it with this or just say next slide? I'll just say next slide. We only have 5 sites. You do the next one? Yeah, perfect. So just one thing of note, we take pride in our community. I'm an Encinitas resident. The 2 primary other participants in the plan are Encinitas residents, and our whole team here today is either Encinitas or North County. All the firms are local in San Diego or above, and this is our area. I myself have been on Santa Fe Drive over 1,000 times between kids and school and sporting events and Encinitas Community Park and the site, and this is where we live, and this is where we plan on continuing living, and I think you'll see, and as I talk, and we made some decisions that were, I think, in the benefit of the neighborhood that we tried to bring through, because we do take pride that the homes we bring really serve this community well. Next slide, please. So Christina touched on a couple of these. I didn't know what she was sharing, and some of them I'll come up a little bit on. Landscaping, just quick highlights on a few key areas. Currently, there are 78 trees. We are proposing 224 trees on the site. The unit mix, which we talked about, 51 homes, 35 detached, 16 attached, well under density, bonus maximum. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. I think it's important to note that the traffic on this site, when this project started, had a church of roughly 300 people and a preschool of roughly 180 students. There was fairly equal traffic to the site of what we're proposing right now. This is not bringing a new thing onto blank land that was greenhouses that wasn't being used. The traffic is really consistent with what was there, and I'll talk a little bit more about traffic on the next slide. And parking, we've talked about a few times, so I won't belabor it, but we have 128 spots for 51 homes. That's roughly 2.5 per house. This was one of the main reasons why we didn't increase the density, is because as we increased the density, it really caused some parking concerns that we felt. We still would have easily met what was required by state density bonus, which is only 73 spots, so we beat that by 55 spots, which is over 1 spot per home. Next slide, please. We're really proud of the community redesign. This has been a roughly 5.5-year process. We've had a lot of city and neighbor input. We redesigned the southwest corner up in the upper right for bioretention and keeping existing trees. We significantly enhanced the pedestrian paths, crosswalk, and entrance. I'd like to just spend a second on the CIP, if I could. First, I don't think that's an objective design standard, but with that said, I think we probably delayed the project about 2 years as Matt and our guys in the back worked on this plan. And although we have smaller roads on the interior of the site, the entranceway to the site is 30 feet, I believe, and it is sunk now with SDA. No matter what happens to the CIP, SDA's entrance won't change, our entrance won't change, the signal light won't change. And that really took an extra 2 years of this project. I can't tell you how many emails we've had on that, more than any project I've ever seen in the history that I've ever been involved about, making sure that that's lined up. So yes, the bus stop might move a little bit, but it's moving away from the entrance. It wouldn't move closer to the entrance, it would move away. And whether it remains back in or parallel, that will not change our entrance to the site at all. And that's what we're really committed to. And one of the problems with the CIP is our current site has two entrances, and that caused some challenges. We're now, at the advice of staff and much community input, we're going to one entrance to make sure it all aligns and goes with the CIP. So we can get more into that later, but we've spent gazillion hours on making sure that is the safest thing for students and the safest thing for the community, and will not change whatever the CIP objectively does or does not do. And then just a bit about density. We talked about the formula and whatnot, but just to remind everyone, and this is taken from the density bonus report, it's 5.2 acres. Essentially, our base density is 42 homes. Our original plan had 57 homes on it, which still was under our allowed maximum. And over the course of this project, we've had multiple people come to us about ways to get creative with density bonus and ADUs and really increase the density on the site significantly. But what we did is we took it the other way. After looking at parking, particularly after looking at the character of the home, we brought it down to 51 homes. That's only 9 homes above our base density, and 5 of those 9 new homes are affordable. And so the way we see it is over 50% of the density bonus homes is affordable, which is what the density bonus law really is. And I think, kind of summation of something I've heard from some of the neighbors is the quote at the bottom: knowing that a project is going to be built on 845 Santa Fe Drive, we support this project and consider it plan as we know what could have been built under state density bonus law. And we really, yes, we have some waivers and different things, but we really dialed back what we could have done to make sure there's parking, safe traffic, and a good feel to the community. And those are really important to us. And that was the result of working with staff that we've made a lot of changes. I mean, this has been my life and my team's life for 5 years. It's a great, better project because of it. And we're confident it will serve the area. Last slide is just a thank you. Thanks again to city staff. Brown Studio, Lindsey Brown is out of the country today. Once we changed a couple of meetings, but I think he's on the phone. And the rest of all our consultants are here from Pasco, Land Lab, Eiler, Mizuta, Allen Matkins, Layden, Recon, and I forgot Lynn Scott on the list, sorry. But they're all here, and I think that they're all here as a testament to how much we've worked with the city on this project over the years to really dial it in and make it a project that, where we could ask for unlimited waivers, we asked for the ones that we thought were necessary to make it the best project we possibly could for the community. So with that, if there are any questions, I can do it now or I can come back at the end. I'm sure there's a couple public comments.
Yeah, we do have a few. I have a few questions for
Okay.
you.
Yes.
I'll start at the end, though. Brent?
Thank you for your presentation. My first question is regarding landscaping. There's a few mature trees at the site currently, and was there any consideration of protecting those, or it just didn't fit into your plan, or?
So originally we were scraping all the trees, and then through looking at our plans, and Emily's over here, and talking to the neighbors, we're saving the trees that are on Moonivar, some very mature trees on Moonivar. Some of the larger interior ones just didn't work, mostly when we got into the civil type plans of it. So those are going, but we are keeping 14, is that right? 14 of the mature trees on Moonivar that have been part of the community for some time.
Great, thank you. And it was my understanding that as the project moved forward, the feedback that you received from the residents on Moonivar had you redesign and decide to put the entrance and exit on Santa Fe, is that correct?
I would say caveat, feedback from the residents, but feedback from the city. We received clear direction. Christina wasn't our planner at the time, but we received clear direction from city planning staff to move the entrance. And again, that took about 2 years to move it because the CIP was in flux at that time and was honestly a real burden to the project, but we think it's a much better project and much safer for the students and aligning with the crosswalk and some of the pedestrian pathways and whatnot. But yeah, it was the neighbors spoke up, but it was at the direction of the city that we moved it.
So you feel better about the location of the,
We do. And that's where the current, like I said, that's where the current location is. That's where the church was served. That's where the preschool was served. And we think it's consistent with that. And now with the improvements to both the street, but then also to the crosswalk, which was kind of dodgy 10 years ago, is that safe to say? It's a much better, it's a much safer area now, much better.
so it sounds like it's been quite a long time since the development of the front part of that project on Santa Fe. I'm still kind of confused why there's a bus stop at the exit.
The reason why the bus stop going eastbound is where it is now is because that's in between the two existing driveways that serve this lot. We couldn't put a bus stop where there would be work for this future development because in the existing condition, you would be blocking a driveway to that lot. So we had to put the bus stop where there was no gap or there was no driveway, realizing that, yes, in the full final condition, the bus stop would have to move.
Thank you. Appreciate your.
Keep coming back to the bus stop, but if there's parallel or they're angled parking, where does the bus pull in?
For the eastbound traffic, as you see, the driveway right before the bus stop, it's not parking, it's just striping on the road where parking isn't allowed to be,
So
so the
that's-
bus can cut in.
So that's not one of the angled parking stalls?
Correct, just west of the existing bus stop now.
Okay. In the plan, I think in the application, or you made there's a reference to native plants. 51%, is that what you're proposing? And I think that's kind of the minimum standard for the city. It seems pretty light for an Encinitas resident to not really consider the, native plant ordinances and things like that, and seems pretty light to just do 51% native plants unless I'm
Yeah.
missing something.
Emily can come up if my answer isn't responsive enough.
Sure.
But I think it has to do with just the maturity of the plants, the droppage of leaves, the site, some of the setbacks and whatnot. And as we looked at native plants, it was determined that was the right mix. I don't know if there's anything I'm not adding to that.
Yes, 50% is required. And we
I think if you're going to respond, you'll need to come up and use the microphone.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Gale from Land Lab Landscape Architecture, and 50% is required for native species, and the project is providing 51%, so we are exceeding requirements.
I think I would calculate that as the bare minimum.
Why did we not decide to do 60%?
Yeah, why not more? I mean, you're taking a vacant lot, which I understand to the biology report by Rincon is, other than a bee and a few different birds, is not really a viable habitat area, but you could actually enhance the area. We've had mature tree ordinances and historical trees on Melba, which aren't far from here, and yet the proposal from local people is to do 1% more than the minimum. Is that the best you can do?
We're also providing low water species and also native and adaptive.
So I'm hearing 51, you like 51%, it's the best you can do.
I think what we'd say is, in looking at all the things, the people who live landscape all day long thought that was the best plan. When we look at water use and the adaptiveness of it and
Well, those are business decisions in terms of how much water your constituents are going to have to pay for when they water their plants. But it doesn't seem like you're making much concession to the city's objectives by doing 1% above the bare minimum. And I would just hope that you would try a little harder.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few questions to dig into the plans a little bit, and I
Yep.
don't know if you'll
Yep, we
be
can
the
do
one
it,
to
and
answer
Yvonne
them.
will step up if we need
And
to.
maybe Christina could pull up some of the plans, but on the roof, I see areas cross-hatched on the roof plans indicating HVAC equipment and maybe future solar panels. Are those screened by a 3-foot parapet? As I read the elevations, I can't find a dimension that would say 3 feet. It seems like they're on the surface of the roof. And maybe we could look at, I'm sorry, I didn't write down the page. I'm looking at the elevations for C-D or elevations for B.
It could be possible. It's, the intention is certainly that they're screened, and if we can certainly agree with if any of the current renderings has it at 2.5 feet and it needs to be 3 feet, it can be accommodated with 3 feet.
Okay, so if we, I appreciate the eagerness to solve it and willingness to solve it. I guess just to be really clear, in the upper right, I'm seeing a dimension that's going to the roof line, and then it looks like maybe there's an extra foot of solid wall and then an open guardrail on the roof deck. Are you saying that within that that existing parapet now, the equipment is screened, or would you have to change that open guardrail into a solid rail?
So Yvonne's going to come on up at Brown
Perfect.
Studio, who actually did the design. He can speak to it more coherently.
Hi, good night. I'm Ivan from the Brown Studio. The design does not have any parapets. All the equipment in the decks, or the railings are on top of the roof.
Okay.
And above.
So the requirement to screen the HVAC equipment is not met.
We would be able to screen it.
How? I guess I'm looking at your elevations right now, and everything that seems to be above, everything above the roof line seems to be an open guardrail. Will you be changing the open guardrails into solid guardrails?
It would be lattice type screening, so that would be on elevation 2, the far left portion. That is the brown color. That is the screening element for any HVAC equipment.
Mm-hmm. And does that comply with, this might be a question for our staff, but does that comply with our height limit, that a 22-foot height limit at the top of the the projection of the roof line at the wall, and then a 3 and 12 roof slope?
Yeah, so this particular drawing, we went through and figured, okay, from the front and the rear elevation, if we were to draw the envelope of a pitched roof, that if an element could fit within that projected theoretical envelope, then we would say it complies. So with that idea in mind, that's why there's very faint dotted lines that come to what would be a pitched roof.
Right.
And so then you just kind of follow that line from front to back and use that ridge as the projected envelope.
Why wouldn't we do that same projection from the side elevations?
So we had that question, and from what we interpreted is that it's highly unlikely that we would have had triangular roofs on all 4 elevations. And so we went with this particular design, if you will, this theoretical design of having pitched roof from the front and the back, and then drawing the ridge that way.
Okay. This is probably why this topic is on our work plan to clean up how we measure height. This is an example of it.
It's section 30.16.01.OB6II, and it mentions hips and gable
Yeah.
roofs.
But a hip is an extremely common type of roof, and it would slope in all 4 directions, like you're describing a pyramidal type of roof, right?
Right, but a
That's the
gable-
definition of a
right.
hip roof.
But it mentions gable roofs too.
Yes.
Yeah, which comes from 2 sides, and then the
you're not-
illustration in the
But you're
code
not
is
to
2
argument
sides.
of
Yes.
it, you're not proposing a gable roof at all. You're proposing a flat roof, and so we're talking about a theoretical projection that I think there's a similar code with the roof deck is supposed to fall between or below that projection, right?
That's correct. So I think I understand where you're going in your thought process, and I'm wondering if it might be something that we could ask as a condition of approval to continue to workshop this piece if it doesn't look like it's
If you were to
doing what it
pull
needs
up
to do.
one of the roof plans, please. It seems like several of these areas hatched are right next to the exterior wall. And so it's a little vague about whether the equipment will be, at the center of the roof or at the outside edge of this roof. I think is it the upper, or these are the elevations?
This one, so this is unit C and D, which is what we
Okay.
were just looking at. And then in the top left corner of the screen is the roof deck plan. And so from what I can see here, they're illustrating the deck portion where people would walk, and then they're also illustrating the mechanical equipment section.
Okay. Would you go to another one as well, like say B or?
Sure, give me a moment. Okay, this one is roof plan for B.
So I'm looking at the lower left corner of that roof plan where it seems to hatch a large area in the lower left corner of that roof, which would imply that mechanical equipment could be placed anywhere in that square, which could be conceivably right directly above the exterior wall of the building, and not in compliance with this imaginary 3 and 12 roof pitch that's going to slope up.
So this one gets a little tricky for me in hearing what you're saying, because it also says solar panels in here, and I don't know that we're able to regulate those as much as maybe we would like.
And I agree with that. I'm not trying to regulate the solar panels, and I recognize that there's latitude within this diagram, but it's not very specific that they would be required to.
The intent is that the HVAC equipment will be screened and will be within the pitch of the roof, and then the solar may be flat on the roof as the roof sits a little bit low. So we agree with that intent.
Okay. Thank you. On the site plan along Munivar Road, there's it looks like maybe a remnant lot, or maybe it's being left as public, but there's a sidewalk that connects down to the street on the south side.
That's the bioretention area.
Well, below that, there's is that all I think it might be slope instead. I'm looking at below lots 4, 5, and 6 to the there. So on the far left is the bioretention, and below 4, 5, and 6 is a linear lot that seems to have a sidewalk that dips.
That is the neighbors have carefully maintained that site over the years, and that is where some of the mature trees that we are keeping are. So
I've seen it differently on different drawings, but this one seems to show a set of stairs at the left side or the west end of that walk, but nothing at the right side. And other plans seem to indicate that there's a stair at both ends of that walk. Will that walk provide ADA access to the street?
there's stairs at both ends, not ADA access.
Okay. Are you able to provide ADA access there?
Not without eliminating the trees, the mature trees.
Okay. That seems like one of our objective design standards is to provide a ADA access to the public right-of-way adjacent to your site.
I mean, I think there is access to the front of the site. This is through access we're talking about, and so through all the plans, this was deemed to be the best plan for the site.
Okay. I think we'll discuss that, I think, because, you know, our objective design standards also have all these guidelines talking about trying to integrate communities into the surrounding neighborhood and not gating them. You're not proposing a gate. I'm not suggesting you are, but more than just one connection to the street seems like it would help stitch this project into the rest of the neighborhood. But, okay, I did not see any floor plans in the drawing set for Unit B2, and I see reference to it, and it's along that same stretch of the site plan.
The floor plan is the same as B. It's just B2 was which one? That was the side, or the.
No, there was a different one. I think that these all seem to be a mirror image of B. but they don't seem to rotate the garage, if that's what you're suggesting.
B2 has the same floor plan, but has the third parking spot, so that is the difference.
The third parking spot in the driveway?
Yes,
Okay,
So
so there
it's-
really is no difference in the floor plan at all?
correct.
Okay. Christina, if you could pull up the site plan, I'm looking at the north end of the lot where lots 51.
Are you looking for a landscape plan or just a site plan?
I'm on the cover sheet with the
Cover
overall
sheet?
site
Okay.
plan. If you kind of zoomed into the top third of the site, I'm looking, comparing lot 51, which has a unit C2, has the garage rotated so that you take access from the cross street there. And then comparing that to lot 38 on the opposite side, where both garages take access from the vertical street there. I don't know if they're named in here, but right. And so on lots 38 and 37, we're going to have two garage doors facing the interior street, where you solved it a little more elegantly on the opposite side, where you rotated one of the garages, and it seems like it's less intrusive. Is there a driving force behind why that was done that way?
You wanna come up? You wanna come up? I think it had to do with the slope, but
Yeah, it's because of how the slope on the existing slope on the site goes from right to left on that image. So rotating the garage on lot 38 would not be feasible for that lot to be on the horizontal street.
In approximate numbers, are we talking about
It's about a
4-foot grade change, a
Yeah.
2 foot, a 1 foot?
It's like a 4-foot grade change on that end of the street.
So is there a wall between lot 38 and the street that's directly north of it?
Correct.
There's a retaining wall?
There is a small retaining wall, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's my questions. Appreciate your answers. You're not quite done.
no problem.
This afternoon, we received a letter from California HOA. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm sure we have some speaker slips. We'd like to go to the public comment section.
First speaker we have is Greg LaFave.
Members of the commission, I'm Greg LaFave. I live on Summit Avenue, just down the street from this. Others have addressed the legal and zoning issues here. I'm going to speak to the ethics of allowing this to proceed. Issue, fire. The fire zone just published, it just starts a few blocks over. God help us when that happens. This project is an evacuation time bomb. It feeds 48 homes into a 25-foot wide lane onto the mess that is Santa Fe. The tragedy of the Palisades fire, where the roads there are 3 times the width of what we're considering here, should inform us. Now, I come from a family of builders and architects. I get it. You have the right to maximize your property. I understand that. This is not the solution. You could cut these numbers in half, and it would still be too big, way outside the ethos that is Encinitas. Fox Point, Goodson, Quail Gardens, they may be legal, but do they fit the ethos that informs Encinitas? You invite catastrophe. Fires will come, maybe not soon, but the horrors of that day will haunt the memories of what you decide this day. Figure it out. A personal anecdote. My dad, late father, was a building contractor in Los Angeles. Years ago, he bid and won a contract to build a giant structure at the Jet Propulsion Lab Caltech Mars project. Construction schedule, 360 days. That's pretty tight. He got the job. The next morning, they said, "We're in a hurry. Can you make it 180 days?" So he got out his TI calculator. Good. He figured it out. Now, they said, how about 120 days? Oh. Then became a chemical engineer discussion about concrete cure rate. They met the urgency. They figured it out. You can fix this. Do not approve this project in its present form. You have a challenge. Do the ethical thing. Figure it out. Thank you.
Is Lisa Provenzano here? And Lisa, you spoke about having two dedications. Do you have those? I gave them to them. That's the 3-minute dedications?
The time
Do
donation.
you have those?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
There's
okay.
no one else here from the community.
Okay.
That didn't speak, so.
Okay.
Can you make it face the right way? Yeah. Okay, 845 Santa Fe Road is on a street that we know is a disaster. We'll have parts of it redone just to bring it up to safety standards and probably ADA standards. The former mayor, which part of the reason he is the former mayor, said, oh, well, it's okay because the fire trucks can go down the center lane. Well, there's 2 of these on that center lane. And the other lanes have been narrowed. So I don't know, there's a fire station right down the street, and down the other way, straight down there, is a hospital. And there's more than 50 doctors going round trip. Your study from 2023 is old. You need to do something now that these modifications have been made. Can you show the next one? So you back in. You're backing in to try to get out of the traffic. And we've talked to people who have trucks and things. So you can't really walk around the back of your car if you have any kind of impairment, if you're in a wheelchair or walker, whatever. You have to walk out and walk around that barrier, and that is a narrow lane to get to something that's a slope. And there have been people with wheelchairs that said, yes, that's their only option. Next one. If you go in between, okay, this is just a joke, I think, because it was planned so poorly. This is further west. This is what they had to do to have a bike lane, go up on the sidewalk. So this street already is going to need to have a lot of modification. A little further up from there, where the people put their trash cans out on trash day, that takes all the pedestrian parking because you have the bike lane. Okay, the next one. When you walk to try to get to the sidewalk, you go up that 11-inch curb. Periodically, there's a little sand walkway, which is short, and the rocks, which are not stable. Then you have to step down on the other 11-inch curb right into the bike lane, and then onto the other curb to get to the pedestrian curb. So I don't even know how this can work with the number of people we have on it. You know, this is a sales transaction. You come in high, the developers come in high, you guys, can see things that just are not okay, and you come back, and then they come back and say, oh, look, we've made all these modifications.
Okay.
And then it goes back and forth.
Thank you.
The last speaker we have is Peter Stern.
Thank you. Good evening. Peter Stern, Rubenstein Avenue. This project, gentlemen, is too big and will have an outsized impact on Santa Fe Drive. It is also insufficient a provision of low and moderate income housing. The project is estimated to generate 478 daily car trips, with 39 a.m. peak hour trips and 48 p.m. peak hour trips. The claim is that this is a conservative estimate. I think this is a fairy tale. In no way is this the correct number. Moreover, this project's driveway is aligned with the Academy's driveway and is proposed to be converted to a full signal. This will be a disaster, and all the trips to the Academy should be calculated with this project to illustrate the burden on this now traffic signal. A Sandag report, 2016, a very broad study reveals an average of 11.3 car trips per household. And in multifamily dwellings, as we have proposed here, there are an average of 6 to 8 trips per dwelling, far more than reported in this EIR. The next problem is that the City Council, by special resolution on June 16, 1993, declared Santa Fe Drive a special case local street. We have to treat it as such. We have taken out traffic lanes. We've doubled the size of the Academy beyond which it was intended. We've expanded the hospital, and we're putting too many houses on a street that cannot handle it. Most recently, in 2023, in Rancho Penasquitos, the principal of Westview High School proclaimed that the addition of new housing developments may be the cause of the congestion on the streets of Westview High School. Let us not make the same mistake. Have the courage to say, no, this project doesn't fit. It's 3 times as hard to repair a mistake that's made than to figure it out in the first place. It's appropriate to reject the waivers, pick this project apart, make it fit, have some exit onto Munavir, and split the incredible traffic that Santa Fe will have to endure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
That's all.
Okay. We typically give the applicant a few minutes, 3 minutes, if you want to respond to anything you heard at public comment, but I'd limit it to just rebuttal and not new information. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to close public comment portion of this and open commissioner deliberation. And I guess I'll just start down the end there. Maybe just to put a little context, it's been suggested that we reject the waivers. There's some discussion about the CIP. We have very narrow parameters in which to make a decision here tonight. We can evaluate this project based on objective design standards that are spelled out in our code. The burden of proof to disprove a waiver is extremely high, and not that maybe you can't, but or we can't, but I would say we ought to all be clear-eyed about just what discretion really resides in the commission here tonight. So with that, I'm going to open it up for our conversation and ask Brent maybe to start us off with any overall thoughts about the project, concerns or likes.
Yeah, thank you. That being said, I certainly had some concerns about the objective design standards. I was not exactly agreeable when I looked at what my calculations may have been for the different measures. I didn't feel like it necessarily qualified in several categories, and just based on a rough calculation of my own, it barely met the standard of passing. I felt that the units were container-like. They didn't necessarily represent, I don't think, the community at large around that particular area. I think it was suggested a bit in the report that it matched sort of the structures that were sort of more adjacent to it. And I think I may agree with that if, regarding the church next door, possibly the school across the street, although I don't really put this in the same category as the school as a structure. It doesn't seem to fit. It's housing is what it is. And these don't look like anything in that particular region whatsoever. I actually found it interesting that the rooftop deck concerns, I never really considered how, like, they have a height standard, yet if somebody goes up there and decides to put a canopy up or an umbrella or whatever, what does that do to the height standard? You know, I don't think that necessarily would affect the surrounding community because no one's necessarily looking upon that. Or would be obstructed by those types of things in this particular project. But I hadn't thought of that before when looking at rooftop decks. You know, I certainly would have more questions, I think, about that. And I thought the screening was there when you talked to, or discussing the mechanics on the roof and the solar panels. I knew solar panels could be tilted to the side, could create some pitch, but generally they're flat on a flat roof. So I thought that would still be okay. And as far as the traffic and the proposal to entrance and exit off of Santa Fe, I think that initially was what residents did want or would prefer, and the city sounded like seemed like they sounded in on preferring it to go elsewhere. May have been coming from the community is why they reacted that way. But I certainly see it proposes such a difficulty right now with Santa Fe being in development as far as parking and traffic flow and street widths and all of that. But I don't think that has any impact on this particular project, as long as they've agreed with the city where the entrance is going to be, and the city does construct the street egresses around that. That should work out just fine. It will have to be something, though, that is an ongoing conversation between this project and that development, though, for sure. I actually just don't not understand how we spent money on putting things in that are now where driveways are going to be, in considering how long this project has been under development, and those projects are under development. So I do share the concerns that the people, the community has around the traffic and around the issues of that street, but I don't think that those are factors within the project. As far as the landscaping is concerned, I do know, I mean, it is unfortunate that they're going to take out mature trees, because the landscaping that they put in will not be mature for quite a long time. And considering the type of construction that they're proposing, I mean, it will be barren looking for quite a while and will take some time to be replaced. But it's, you know, I applaud them for replacing it almost a 2-for-1, though. That was very nice to see. And, you know, definitely feel like that's something that our other commissioners would appreciate. Commissioner particularly would very much appreciate the number of new trees that are going to be added to the location. So I think I'm sitting in somewhat of a favorable position to support it, based on what we know about the affordable housing policies, and you know, mitigating as much as they can regarding the internal portions of the project. I don't prefer to see projects that don't have any street parking. I wish there was street parking. I think that there's quite a few units on there that in this particular project, close to, not quite half of them, but, at least over a quarter of them that they didn't have any driveway parking. And they're going to take up those extra spots, and then anyone needing to access the community just for even brief periods are going to need to park way out on Santa Fe, and that's going to be very difficult. So, but again, they exceeded the number of parking spots, and we encourage those types of things here. So I was happy to see those numbers where they were. So that's what I have so far.
Okay, Bob, any initial thoughts?
Brent brought up a lot of good comments. Thank you very much. The deck issue popped up on Piraeus in terms of outdoor space and noise, and I guess there's ordinances for things like that. It does bring up a height issue and what you can do up on those decks, and wasn't sure if those decks were part of the calculations for the total livable area. No, it usually doesn't work that way. I was a little concerned about the traffic comment and the fact that another comment I had would have been, did the traffic calculations consider the expansion of the Scripps Hospital that's just about done on the other side of the freeway? And it just kind of scratched my head about, the intersection to the east not having the same calcs as the intersection to the west, and it's 500 feet away, and people drive up and down that same street without turning down. That's even before you get to Belor, which is the cut through over to the Oaks Crest Middle School. So I find that just kind of baffling at the moment. They have a right to build. The process of going through the housing density bonus law is what it is, and they've submitted for that. But what I was trying to get to was the calculations under the Encinitas code. I don't think we're getting more than one more unit, and we're having to provide, as a city, almost 20 more units to get one. And to your point, Steve, we have a very narrow description, but I think the developer, in terms of coming up before us in the ethos of Encinitas and, providing one more unit per the code to provide him and them 20 more units and asking for 10 waivers is somewhat disingenuous to the community. I think it kind of spits in our face a little bit. That's just my opinion. They're small units. Those are business decisions that they have to make, and their investors are going to have to make a decision on things like water. I don't think that they've really tried too hard. They have kept some trees, and I appreciate that. They're probably I haven't looked at the landscaping plan to the point where I see the size of the boxes, but to your point, most of the time they go into the minimum box size, and those takes years to develop. Your comment, Brent, also about the units matching the area. I think if you just go up the street closer to Lake as you go east, those are very large homes and large open spaces with ADUs and big driveways, and that certainly doesn't match this project. And that was something that built a low-density project without housing density bonus laws, and that seemed to work out. But clearly they have a different business model than the gentleman up the street. But that's, again, their decisions. Very narrow. I trust you, Steve, and some of the comments about the roof pitch, and there's some calculations there that are outside my swim lane. But I try to understand them and follow them, and I appreciate you bringing those up because those are very technical, and your knowledge is very helpful there. Again, given where we are with the decision that we have to, given the fact that they've proceeded down the density bonus law path, there's nothing other than fire, life, safety, ingress and egress out of a single unit. If you put the exit into the project off of Munivar, then of course you're going to impact everybody on that street. And I can see why the neighbors didn't want that. Might be safer to have two exits through the project, but if the city was encouraging him to go to Santa Fe, well, then he honored the city's request and built a project around the Santa Fe exit. I don't think that they have enough parking. We've had this issue throughout the city. They commented they could have done 73, and I know the business model of doing 73 units based on what's happening on developments in North Park who don't build enough parking. But again, they say that they're doing more than they need to, and by law they probably are, but that's probably more of a business decision than it is trying to follow the code. But again, that's your decision. So as it relates to the housing density bonus laws and the narrow descriptions that we have, I think they've met them, but I do think that they could have done better. And that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just to try to whittle the list down a little bit, if I could respond to a few things. Parking, I don't think that's really a conversation we get to, they've exceeded, and maybe we should just say thank you, right? They could have come in with much less. And so I feel like I agree with you, Bob, the exit to Santa Fe, hey, they were directed that way by our city. I'm going to defer to our engineers who have, the technical and the science behind traffic in mind when they do those, and I would defer to them to have done that. And I'd hate to redirect the project now to say, we don't like that. Discussions about fire, I don't see any issues with fire here. These roads are plenty wide. A freeway lane is 12 feet wide, and this is 24 feet wide. So a truck can go up and down this lane, easily enough. And it's a circular thing. There's no having to back up and do anything like that. We're not in a fire severity zone. We might be near it, but the whole city is near something, right? But I just don't see that as an issue. You bring up the big house project up the street. I don't see those as having to be compatible at all. I would link our earlier conversation, your report about cluster housing, and I think the city should be finding smaller lot sizes, smaller unit sizes. I kind of applaud them for not pursuing, that other project, right? And that other project is working for somebody, but it's millions of dollars to own there, right? It's not going to be millions of dollars to own here. It might still be a lot, but anyway, I think it's meeting a niche or a segment of the market that is not necessarily served throughout. To your point, Brent, about the aesthetics of it, I actually like it quite a bit. It really hits my modernist aesthetic, and I like the look of that building. And so I would argue or suggest that maybe there's different tastes within a population, and maybe we're not here to regulate a specific style or something. But I do find it quite pleasant to see. But I want to circle back to that because I think there's a nuance there I want to touch on. Native landscaping, they've met our requirement. You always want more. Maybe we need to talk about moving the code up. But at this point, they've satisfied that, and I think it would be very difficult to hold them accountable for anything more than what they've done. The small units I liked. The density calculation, I think that's an important one. I think we struggle with asking the community to accept these large projects, and then the question becomes, how many units did we really get out of it, other than a general increasing of the total stock of housing available and the effects that supply has on cost and demand. But I do think we want to consider if it can't be decided tonight, put a condition that be revisited about what truly is the calculation. And in my experience, we've rounded up at every step. Like even tonight, it's been suggested that the base density was 42. You establish what a base density is and then apply your density percentage to that. So.
Yes, staff would concur. We looked into it further, and we would just make the recommendation that, as you've already stated, that you include the condition of approval that the applicant provides the number of units consistent with Government Code Section 65915.
Okay. So that, I think, and Bob, I'll applaud you for digging into that one enough to flush it out. Traffic level of service, you've expressed some concern about Evergreen. I don't know we've addressed a project yet that had such a high level of service. Every project we look at has a level of service of D or F, right? So for a project to come in with a level of service B seems refreshing. I mean, like, okay, great, thank you. Not that they did anything to create that, but it's a higher level of service than we're used to looking at. I have to think that as we move out away from the site, it's going to improve, not decrease, meaning whatever cars pass by that Bonita intersection on the way to, it can't make it worse, I think, at Evergreen. It's just got to dissipate because some cars will turn and move. And I think Bonita and that other intersection are a much busier intersection across streets wide. So I'm not as concerned about the traffic study out beyond the 3 intersections that they studied. Which I guess maybe to cycle back to where I'm really going is I do think there's some objective design standards that aren't being met. I want to preface this by saying I think it's a very attractive building. I like the architectural style and the materials of it, but that looks really great for a custom home, 5 units, something. But at 50 units, I think there ought to be greater variety of roof lines or material or color. And so I kind of disagree with the chart that was kind of an all or nothing. Like you get 4 points just by meeting at one time. So, and I guess what I'm advocating with you guys is not for wholesale changes of anything, but I do think if instead of natural wood for every wood siding, that maybe there's some variety of stains or something that would create some variety on these projects, on this project particularly, right? When I look at Santa Fe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 duplexes that are all going to be the same rear elevation facing the street, we should do something to adjust the placement of a window or at least in the color. I think it's a very nicely masked project. I think they've done a good job of differentiating some wall planes and this and that, but because they've used such a similar strategy, I'll come back to you, but because they've done such a similar strategy on each of the units, in combination, it looks very difficult to distinguish why one unit is different than another unit. So knowing that we have to, we can only hold them to objective design standards. I look at the design standard 2.3.1, which says stagger unit placement. And also that same one says main entrances should face the street. And I can see on unit C, on lot 38, you cycle to the very back of the building before you come into the front door. That the entry should face the street, or if for units greater or projects greater than 50, they can face a common area. But this is entering, I'm looking at lot 38 particularly, is entering from the rear yard. And that doesn't seem like it's meeting that standard. Design standard 5.3.1 says vary the setback, vary the materials, the colors, the roof forms, the height, the footprint. I mean, again, I think that the approach is so similar in all of the units that that variety just doesn't come across in this project to me, and I don't think that's being met. And then finally, the screening. I think there's a technical solution and there's a workaround around it, but I do think the imaginary slope of 3 and 12 ought to be applied to every wall around the perimeter of the building instead of just assuming an imaginary gable down the middle. I think there should be some clarification. And so design standard 5.4.3 says that a minimum parapet of 3 foot to screen HVAC equipment. And I think that should be shown with more clarity in the drawings about how that's being screened within that. So with that, I would suggest, if we're looking for a path forward, and if I could, I would like to recognize maybe the applicant again, if you wanted to clarify something relating to the variety of materials.
Yeah, I think in some of the renderings, it was the same color material in the application. I'm trying to show this. Can I put it? It does show a variety, and it was always intended to have some variety in the different materials. That's upside down, but I think it's okay. So we agree with that finding. There was always envisioned to be some slight variation. It got into some changes in rendering issues, but we support slight changes. We too, part of what our ethos has been on the project is that when we're driving through the neighborhood, that you can say it's the lighter one, it's the darker one, it's this one, and we even talked about doing some finishes and some door things, but we were concerned about, if we put a yellow door on the image, is that restricting it to a yellow door and whatnot? So we wanted to maintain the theme and not make it look chaotic, not make it look cluttered, but we are certainly amenable to some variation in color. And you can see in the submitted materials, it was white and gray stucco and different variations of wood color.
Okay. I think you're on line with where I'm discussing. I don't want to see, high contrast things for contrast's sake, right? But I would be cautious, and I think this is one of the dangers of trying to bake in some flexibility, is that when you say the stucco will be tan, which is in the drawings, how are we supposed to know what tan? Does that mean there's 3 different shades of tan or not? So, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to close the public comment.
On the design, is there any references, I forgot, to like an attempt for a front porch? I mean, one of the things about the design here with the driveways and the garage taking up so much space, there's no real sense of community because no one's on their front porch watching people go by. And we commented on this on the Melba project. I think we commented on it on the cost of 48. And when you design something like this with such density, there's no room to walk around and visit your neighbors. And I don't know if there's room on the sites or if that's just me. I mean, I've lived in cities before, in Los Angeles, and one of the nice things was sitting on your porch, and these houses obviously were designed in the 30s, and everyone would walk by and say hello. Right. I don't see anything like that. Can you, is there something in the design guidelines that I don't remember?
There's a design standard for covered porches, or not porches, I want to be cautious,
right.
Covered entryways.
Covered entryways.
And if you look at the plans, there are overhang, there's a covered entry. I think they meet that standard.
All
now,
right.
I agree with you. I like a porch, but I also hesitant to come in and
say,
hey, you guys should be, this, but I looked at that. I guess I didn't feel like I found enough evidence or ammunition to reject it on that term.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking just from a ethos standpoint, in terms of a community standpoint, even if you go to the older neighborhoods in Village Park, there's, entries, then people are out front. There's really no room here to create a sense of community in a very dense location. Mm-hmm. It's clearly a design decision and can't. I'm just curious.
I would compliment them on, as it relates to creating a community, and we haven't talked about it just now, but there was some discussion about that they're a 0 setback. And I think by doing that, they have enabled each house to have a more usable yard space, right?
Oh, good.
Instead of each person getting a 5-foot side yard that they can't use anything, they each get a 10 or greater 13-foot side yard. So I think that's nice, and it's, but I'm off track a little. It's not creating the porches, but it is creating a usable outdoor space around in the community beyond just, they do have the common area as well.
They do, and on this, I don't know if I have to tell them what I'm doing, but on your map here, was there a design that was a solid wall. Some of the pictures that I saw had solid walls and no windows.
Right.
I don't know if that's required.
That's a solid wall.
That is a solid wall. Does it fit our design standards for length of wall without a window? That's always come up on houses in our past approvals. Maybe they can answer the question. Maybe there was a picture. I pretty much saw a rendering.
I think they solved it by changing there's a combination of wood siding and stucco.
Right.
So yeah, there were some walls that didn't have windows. They won't be able to because of the the property line there.
Right.
But I guess nothing that.
There's nothing in the code that says, you have to have a window with 50 feet. I thought that came up on the last house in
I
Cardiff.
think the length of the wall is over 30 feet long, then you have to have a
So
window.
Christiane, could you pull up one of the renderings of?
Yes,
one of
working
the
on
lots?
it.
Thank you. Guess I should be doing this in a public manner. I know it came up on the last house in Neptune, actually. Okay. So that picture in the bottom right, does that meet our design guidelines?
So I think the design guideline is asking for articulation and change of planes, and so they've accomplished that. And then there is a window on that elevation. It may not be as many as we would like, but there's a window there.
The one at the very front?
Yes.
And the articulation you're talking about is the pop out or the bump out?
Yeah,
And that's
so
the articulation?
correct. So for me, when I'm looking at this, I read it as not a flat wall. There's movement happening as far as the wall planes are coming in or coming away from you. And there are changes of material colors as well as material itself is changing. And so there is movement, so to speak, happening there on that wall plane.
So there's a line that goes across. I'm looking at the elevation side right.
Mm-hmm.
And so the black line that cuts across is not showing an articulation from a pop-out standpoint. It's just showing a line for height. But you're saying that, in your opinion, the upper half is one type of wood and the bottom half is another type of wood, and that shows articulation?
Yes, from what I'm reading, it doesn't look like they sit flat on each other. It looks like there's some amount of change happening.
Can I ask the architect to confirm or deny that there's a setback
It's not
there?
my design, so
Well, he's right there. You have to open up for me to ask that
I guess,
question.
would you have the designer come up so he can answer this question?
Hi, yes, on that particular elevation, there is a material variation and a slight difference in plane from the bottom to the top.
Okay, so, all right. And then going back to Steve's question earlier, in the upper right-hand corner of that right hand, is that I just want to reiterate the HVAC screening of those we're going to.
That would be an example where I feel like that equipment is too close to the rear elevation.
Right.
And it wouldn't fall behind an imaginary plane that's 3 and 12 from the
Right,
wall.
right. So we're going to address that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is just also an example of where I may have scored it differently.
Yes.
Well, I was kind of what I was
But-
getting to.
Yeah.
It didn't fall outside of the guidelines for their meeting the total number that they needed and that type of thing.
Right. It does seem like maybe there's a system of partial points but that's a different discussion, I think, but you're right. It seems like all or nothing is like, well, that's a lot on a 50-unit project.
Right.
When some don't
Right.
do any.
Yeah.
Where do you guys stand on, I had a concern about ADA access to Munavar. And I recognize that it's an existing walkway in stair. But I feel like, I guess I'm conflicted because I know they're trying to save mature trees, and I know they've been working with community members specifically probably in that area. But I'd like to see someone in a wheelchair to be able to get down to the street there.
Is that a staff question in terms of what the priority becomes? I mean, can we approve something that's not ADA compliant? Or as it was defined by the applicant, that those are stairs there and?
Or is it ADA compliant since it has access on the north side?
No, I think any work that they do, they're required to do it to an ADA standard.
But
Now, if it's an
it is
existing sidewalk.
on the north side, though.
No, yeah, I think you're going to say if everybody's allowed to go this direction.
I'm not arguing that it is ADA. I'm
Yeah.
saying, are we questioning if it is one enough?
Yeah, is
You wanna-
one.
you wanna chime in?
I can briefly chime in and ensure that during the building permit phase, the project is reviewed to ensure that it meets all appropriate building standards, and that includes ADA requirements.
I'm looking at design standard 4.5.1, which I think it says that basically accessible access would be created tying in a project to the community, and that would be it. I don't think, to your point, Brent, you're not allowed to provide one access point, say, to the opposite street and say, well, they'll go around the block. And
Right, I see, because it's a main thoroughfare street.
If you're
it
letting
needs to have
everybody
it.
go back that way, I
Got
think
it.
they'd be
Got
required.
it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, so
So does that go into the resolution? If it's not represented on the page and there are stairs there now, don't we need to specifically state in our approval that that needs to be fixed? Or is that implied that through the process, it gets fixed?
It's implied that through the process it would be fixed. However, you can include as a condition of approval that the project meets all ADA accessibility requirements. But these are standards that are located within the California Building Code that do require certain design parameters be met to ensure that those accessibility requirements are essentially met in the design.
And that is their property, so we.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to move towards some sort of decision on this. There's three of us. The way our bylaws are written, we all three have to agree for a resolution or a motion to pass, and we need a motion to make some completion of this thing, okay? So we're looking for some consensus here. I made 4 notes.
Very good
Okay.
That we are concerned about the calculation of density, and if it should be rounded to 6, it should be adjusted in the plan. I have a concern over the resolution of the HVAC screening on the roof, and this would relate to applying the 3 and 12 imaginary roof plane from all 4 sides of the building, not just the 2 sidewalls. I'd like some sort of verification at a variety of colors, and we've seen a color board shown. The renderings are all very or very similar in tone. I'd like to reiterate the importance to the commission or to us that there be a variety of colors. And then I'd like to, I'm less certain on the 4th one here, but on the ADA access to Munivar.
I would accept it with all of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, the calculation is important, and I would want, clearly, the applicant can just say, well, unit number 22 will be affordable, and they can do that right here. But barring that, then I don't know if I can support a project that staff report might be incomplete. So is the staff report need to be tightened up and then we vote to it? And I see council commenting, so I'll stop.
I'll weigh in. No, if you believe, you can put a condition that the calculations need to be re-looked at. Because if, in fact, they should have rounded up on one of the calculations and it should be 6 instead of 5, then the direction and condition will be they need to provide the 5 of the affordable units the 6 affordable units as opposed to the 5. So that's just what they're required to provide as affordability. That probably won't change the number of units that they're going to, on the overall density of the units. So you can do that. You don't have to make staff go back and change that. You can put that direction, because while we're sitting up here, we all may think that calculations they're supposed to be 6 instead of 5, but maybe their calculations are correct and we've missed something, and they are correct and they should be 5. So that's why I'm suggesting you can make that recommendation, so that way you don't hold anything else up. Does that make sense?
It does, but the flip side is they could say, well, I've got to do 6 now, so my math doesn't work, and I want to come back and make a project 59 units. But then that's a different project.
That's exactly
And they would have
correct.
to come back.
Exactly correct.
So
It
in
would
the
be a new project, new design, so the
Yeah.
project would go away, and you'd have a whole new project to review.
Although, would this count as one meeting, even if they brought back a different project? Because
Not when, okay, this is
Sure, no.
my opinion, I may not be right, but if they're coming back with a whole different project, because you're looking at 51 units, right? They would have to redesign to put 59 units in there, would they not? So now you're looking at a whole different layout and plans and where they're going to be. So you're not looking at the same project anymore. They may look the same as far as architectural, let's say, but now you've got a whole different layout, maybe a whole different design, how the streets go. So that's a new project, because they're now asking for 59 of the, so what I'm saying is, I don't think that cuts into, because they've substantially amended it. So that's what also the 5 meetings, if they're amending something where it's different, the 5 meetings don't apply. So, yeah, I don't think this would count as a meeting. I think you'd be able to say you've started over, but the new meeting would count as a new meeting.
Okay. Thank
Sorry,
you.
that was a
No,
long-winded way to say that.
I like the response. Thank you. It's helpful to understand.
I think we have a choice to get to, meaning if we're in agreement on this list, we can turn to them and say, we're going to reject this, and let them come back and fix these things. Or and I'd rather, I guess, make a motion that has these as conditions and say, as long as you come back with, that Christina can verify that the color, that there's 2 different colors of wood stain and there's 2 different stucco colors, that there's a variety in the colors and they've addressed each of our concerns, we don't need to see it again.
I'd support the latter.
Okay.
What about the calculations on the roof and the HVAC? Is that,
I think
that goes to staff to review?
Yeah,
Or does
I
it come
think
back to
that's,
us and make sure that it hits the design guidelines? I mean, is that now passed to staff in terms of their approvals?
They have the design guidelines. All we're saying is they had a policy in place, and we're saying expand that policy to include the 2 end walls. And then at that point, it's going to be a technical determination to. You saw on the elevations, they've already drawn the walls for one elevation, just draw the same diagonal lines for the second, the second and fourth elevation, third and fourth.
So if they don't qualify, then staff would
Yeah, they'll have to move the HVAC equipment further away from the
wall
edge.
from the
of
edge to get
house.
the slope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's where I'm feeling we're maybe coalescing around.
Yep.
Okay.
Need to identify
I
them
think
specifically
I think
before
someone
we
needs
put
to
them in.
officially make a motion. Someone should second that, and we'll take it.
Who'd like to make the motion? Would you like to make the motion?
Oh, sure. Who, me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve the project with 4 additional conditions made. There should be a verification of the density calculation, particularly as it relates to the rounding at each step of the calculation, rounding up. The second condition being to resolve the HVA screening by applying the 3 and 12 imaginary roof plane to all 4 sides of the building. Condition 3 is for the staff to confirm or verify that there is indeed a variety of different colors on the color material board. And item 4 is to provide ADA access to Munavar at the eastern end, or wherever it works for them. But
I second that.
okay. A motion and a second, I'll call the vote.
You did say you did say approved project. You did say approved project at this beginning.
Yes, yes. Okay, that does pass 3-0, with 2 commissioners absent. I'd like to take a 10-minute break if we could till 8:33, and we'll resume then. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Moving on to item 8B, which is case number policy 007031, 2024. Public hearing to consider a recommendation to the City Council for the adoption of the Vehicle Miles Traveled Exchange Program. And Patty, are you doing this one? Or Evan? Okay. Oh, yeah, sorry. Just go a little further in the report. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Evan.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Evan Jednak, Senior Mobility Planner, here tonight to present item 8B. It's the Vehicle Miles Traveled, or VMT Exchange Program. For background, SB 743 was passed in 2013 and stipulated that from 2020 on, level of service shall no longer be used for measuring CEQA transportation impacts, and that VMT is the new metric. Level of service was a measurement of traffic congestion, while VMT refers to the distance a car travels. The law required that the city adopt VMT guidelines specifying thresholds of significance. So in November 2023, the City Council adopted our VMT analysis guidelines. Concurrent with that adoption, City Council directed staff to create a VMT exchange program in which developers construct multimodal improvements in exchange for a VMT reduction. The exchange program provides a framework for developers to reduce significant VMT impacts by constructing bike and pedestrian projects that have been identified by the city but are not currently funded for construction. Therefore, these bike and pedestrian projects meet the requirement of additionality, meaning the projects would not have been constructed without inclusion in the program. So I want to emphasize here that developers must physically construct these projects. They're not paying an in lieu fee to the city for construction. And this ensures that the improvements get built concurrent with the development and therefore truly mitigate the VMT impacts. The program allows developers to potentially mitigate their project VMT to either lessen significant levels or to mitigate significant impacts to the extent feasible as required by CEQA. Staff has developed a list of bike and pedestrian projects, all of which are unbuilt bike and ped projects already identified in the Active Transportation Plan, or ATP, and all are located within existing developed rights-of-way. They have been separated into high and medium priority lists. The high priority projects include the unbuilt ATP bike and ped projects already identified as a priority in the previous Modal Alternatives Plan or Infrastructure Task Force efforts. And the medium priority projects include all the other unbuilt ATP bike and ped projects that do not appear in any previous priority list. This slide shows a snip of the high priority project list. Only the top 5 line items are shown here for example purposes, but for each high priority project, a unit length in miles, a daily VMT reduction, and a cost estimate has been assigned. The daily VMT reduction for each improvement was calculated using research and documentation from the State Greenhouse Gas Reduction Handbook, which is industry standard practice for such calculations. The cost associated with each improvement was estimated based on historical data and previous projects that the city has constructed. And it's noted that the cost estimates are in 2025 dollar values, and actual costs will vary based on site-specific conditions and market costs at the time of construction. Developers will work with city staff to determine if the development project has a significant impact and their options for using the exchange program. The process for an applicant to choose a project from the list follows the priority hierarchy shown here. First consideration will be given to high priority projects located within a half-mile distance of the development. Second would be for high priority projects located within a half mile of a school. Third would be high priority that facilitate access to key destinations like a school, park, beach, community center, or shopping center. And if no projects on the high priority list are feasible, the medium priority projects that facilitate access to key destinations should then be considered. Regarding CEQA environmental compliance, an initial study was prepared to analyze the potential environmental impacts of the project and resulted in a negative declaration. No significant impacts were identified, and therefore no mitigation measures are required. The CEQA 30-day public review and comment period occurred from April 25th to May 27th. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending that the City Council approve and adopt the VMT Exchange Program. And that concludes the presentation. Staff and the project consultant, Katie Cole from Fair and Peers, are here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Brent, do you have any questions?
Thank you for the report and putting forth an effort to meet our state obligations here. I had a comment and I had a question. So I'll start with my comment. In the presentation of the report, I kind of felt like the using of the program portion belonged before the VMT Exchange Program projects section, because I kept going through looking for, well, what project would I select if I was a developer and I was reading through this? And that calculation comes in that using the exchange program portion. And so therefore, then having that knowledge would, you would know what you would need to do then to select a project. That was my only comment. Not that you didn't have everything in there. I felt like everything was in there that they would need. My question comes with when I was thinking about when a developer came up with a level of mitigation that they needed to meet, and then they were matching that to projects in discussion with the city. If there were several projects that would be available to them, the projects that were listed had different values, monetary values associated to them. And I was just wondering, would they be given guidelines, or if there were going to be guidelines regarding their selection, or would they have free reign on making their selection? And what really came to my mind in thinking about that is why would a developer choose a project that's more expensive? They probably would not. And so the ones that seem to be the least less costly and have the highest impact as far as VMT exchange were the bikeway pathways and things like that. So if you had anything to comment on that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katie Cole with Fair and Peers. We were the consultant company that assisted the city with this program. So the cost estimates for all of the projects are just based on general unit costs. So the details of like the very specific site issues were not fully vetted when we created the cost. It's just a cost per mile of bike lane or a cost per mile of sidewalk. There are the cost difference between doing striping for a bike lane and installing a sidewalk gap is different. So in the example that you provided, if you're just looking at the sidewalk list, the unit cost, the difference in the cost is really just the difference in the length of the sidewalk gap that they're closing. The unit cost that was used to determine the cost is the same. But there is a difference between the effectiveness of the bike facility versus the sidewalk, and the bike facility is less expensive. And that's simply because these bike facilities are things that are primarily in the existing right-of-way and primarily striping. So, and that's a lot less expensive than having to construct curb and gutter and, the actual sidewalk. So, there is a vetting process that has to happen with the city staff. The intention here is that this isn't done siloed, that the developer would be communicating with city staff and choosing those projects. But you're also correct that the developers are savvy. And so, they would be looking at this list and recommending or choosing projects that have the biggest bang for their buck. I don't know that there's much we can do to change that because the city wants both bike facilities and sidewalks. The outcome is that you may end up with the bike facilities happening faster than the sidewalk gap closures. But there's certainly the ability to provide prioritization. We've already done that with those 4 tiers that Evan explained. So step 1 is for them to identify a project that is within a half mile of their project site. If that is not possible or not available, then they would move to identifying a project that is nearby their site, but also connects to a school or another prominent land use. If that's not available, then they would pick any of the highest priority projects. And if that's not possible, then they go to the medium. There is the ability, though, to further refine those steps. That's what this framework is for. So there's certainly a possibility of providing additional steps or clarification within those. If the preference is to first focus on sidewalks, for example, that could be something that was written into the document.
Can I piggyback on your question, though, as it relates to the monetary value assigned? What's the real value? I mean, so that number is admittedly a number from 2025 or 24. Like, it's just in some way a random number assigned to it, right? And
the cost estimate is really just there to provide some high-level planning information. If an applicant or developer is able to construct the project for less than what this planning level estimate is, that's fine. The city is not collecting any money as part of this program. What the city is getting is the project. So as a city, you don't really care how much it costs to build it.
Correct.
So if they can do it for less, that's fine.
Okay. And the developer really, I mean, ultimately, they need to achieve the VMT reduction. I mean, that's the number that they...
The number that they care about is the VMT reduction. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's an interesting question. So if they care about the VMT reduction, is there an equivalent? So for instance, if you, Evan, if you go back to your list of your snapshot of 1 through 5, but I think I saw in the report that it goes 1 through 12 or something. So it really comes down to the daily VMT reduction column. In this case, 1.1 is 60. They get 60 credits. It just costs them $320,000 to get their 60 credits. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay. So they could choose to add number 3 and number 4, to Brent's point about trying to get the biggest bang for their buck. The city gets it done. And I think it mentions in the report that the city gets it done because the C of O is not issued to the applicant or the developer until this is met. So this is the condition of their C of O.
Right, and this is considered to be CEQA mitigation. So this would be part of their mitigation package and would need to be implemented prior to their certificate of occupancy.
So at least we have their feet to the ground and they just can't say, well, I put it in and it never gets done because it goes into the,
No, I think
the
that's
general
good.
plan abyss.
So the dollar amount is being offered as a convenience to the developer to roughly estimate how much they might be on the hook. But they're ultimately going to go bid it out and do the work.
Correct,
and
yeah.
price it themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is they may be able to achieve it for a less of an expense than we would if we were doing it with public dollars, just because of the requirements that we have to meet. But yeah, the cost there is simply just to provide a planning level information. It's, yeah.
Thank you.
And so the daily VMT reduction, in this case, number 1.1 is 60. That's the equivalent. How does your report show how that calculation is achieved, that the number 60 was the impact of project number? Is there there's an example, I believe. Can you walk me through the pachinko ball of the example of how
Sure.
it ends up being the number 60, or in the case of the example 25 or whatever it is?
Yeah, so the amount of VMT reduction associated with the projects that are in the list are calculated using a kind of a state of the practice research document from the from CAPCOA, which is the California Association of Pollution Control Officers District. They've done research. They've actually updated this document a number of times, and it includes research on how effective different measures are at reducing VMT. So that was what was used to figure out how much VMT is associated with each of the projects that are in the list, the infrastructure projects. And so those are set. When an applicant comes in, their first step is to calculate their VMT for their project. So when they're doing their CEQA study, they have to do a VMT analysis. They would identify how much VMT their project creates and then compare it to the city's threshold. If they're above the threshold, they need to provide mitigation, and this provides an option for that mitigation. So the way that looks is that you subtract the amount of VMT that the threshold is from the amount of VMT that their project creates, and you get a remaining amount of VMT that is left to mitigate. And then you would go pick off of, the applicant will first start with on-site related measures. So they'll look at travel demand management measures. Maybe they are constructing some public sidewalk along their frontage or bike facilities along their frontage. They can take credit for those things. So that would be first. Once they've done that, they will have some remaining amount of VMT left, and that's what they could use the program to mitigate.
So traffic always seems to be a big issue in town, and the impacts of the projects on traffic. Now, a lot of the projects that we've seen recently have all been housing density bonus law. My understanding is the VMT calculations are only for those projects that are governed by CEQA. So a lot of what we've had recently have been, like this evening, was a housing state density bonus law. So the VMT calculation wouldn't apply in the case of tonight's example because it was
kind of. So that project did have a mitigated neg deck associated with it. So it was a discretionary permit that had to go through the CEQA process. From what I could see in that project, it did not have a VMT impact. And so because of that, it would not need to use this program.
But technically the neg deck took it out of the calculation.
The neg deck, if you looked at the technical studies that were associated with that environmental project, one of the technical studies was the VMT analysis. And that VMT analysis concluded that the project had a less than significant impact. So because of that, they wouldn't need to rely on this program for mitigation.
Clarification.
Yeah, can I also add to that? So the previous project was deemed complete before the VMT analysis guidelines were adopted. And so it was therefore not applicable with the current thresholds.
Right, so it wouldn't have been applied. So also, I think some of the most recent projects, I always try to have a practical application to what we're talking about. And one of the other projects that came up was Quail Gardens. And in that particular project, they used, I think they had to do a VMT calculation, but only for paper purposes, but they were governed by ADTs based on when they applied for their permit. So it's going to take a while for this to kick in based on when a project is deemed stamped.
Yeah, deemed complete.
Complete.
So if they're deemed complete before November 2023, when the city adopted the VMT analysis guidelines, then they would not have to abide by the current standards.
So basically everything after that date would then be subject to this calculation.
Yes.
And it's CEQA governed. So
yes.
Kind of if A, then B, then C. Okay. And you guys negotiate, so let's assume that back to the calculation of the 1 through 9, it's a 60. So you sit down, the process is for the staff and the city to sit down with the applicant and work with them. They might choose 2 30-point projects because they want to, or because of cost, or because of time, because maybe the permits associated with doing a sidewalk fill is going to take 6 months, and they want to get their C of O done, and they waited to the last minute, and they're just going to go, heck, I'll just go stripe some bicycle lanes and use my 60 points that way. So a way to, it'd be great, we get a lot done, but we don't get the heavy lift done. So how does that work? Is that just a conversation with you and the applicant?
So that's a great question. We always work with the applicant, and there is that hierarchy that they have to look at the first 1/2 mile within their project site. So if there is a gap, then staff would work with them and try to negotiate that they fulfill that tier so it complies with the program.
So if 1.1, and they have 60 points that they have to mitigate, or whatever we're calling it, and it's within a 1/2 mile of their site, they can't really skip to 1.2 or 1.9 because it's 2 miles away. They have to choose the one that falls within their concentric circle of a 1/2 mile, and that might be 1.1 or 1.2. And they are kind of forced to do that because that's the true impact of their development site.
That's correct. That's the intent of the program and the hierarchy established.
So let's say that he's got 30 and all of these are 60. Do you negotiate with them and say, hey, apply your 30, give us half the $200,000 and we'll do the other half for the sidewalk because that's within the 1/2 mile and that's the most immediate impact? Is there room for the city to negotiate under these guidelines some sort of, because the number 10 might be 2 miles away, but it's not within the 1/2 mile kind of thing?
We would work with them to comply with that hierarchy. I'm not sure I followed your whole train of thought there, but.
Well, let's just say they're only required to do 30, is there 30 points. And within 1/2 mile, there's not a 30-point project. There's a 60-point project that's immediately impacted by their development. And speaking of development, it's not just housing, it can be commercial, right? So any kind of development that is going to trigger the VMT analysis, whether it's commercial or medical, all gets used. We'll use this calculation, right? I'm going to housing because we had housing tonight. But it's all commercial, right? Okay. So I'm just saying that the impact, they only have to give you 30 points, and the number 1 and 2 are within their 1/2 mile of their impact of their project. How do you deal with, gosh, I don't want them to go fix something 5 miles away because that really is not the impact on the project within the 1/2 mile, which is the intent of the guideline. So I'm asking the nuance of what would happen in that scenario.
Well, it's a brand new program. So we would, it is an optional program, right? So we would work with them to try to fulfill that, first tier. If they didn't want to reduce their VMT reduction, right, because it's cost,
Right.
then we would probably work with them to find the next closest to get that 30 VMT reduction. Okay. But we always try to get as much as we can.
There we go.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you. Any motions coming forward?
I would motion to move this forward. And
This seems like a win-win.
This is a win-win. This is great.
I liked it. It looks great. It had the appropriate amount of guidelines and flexibility and all the information necessary. Let's move it on to the city.
And one last thing, if number 1 and 2 get done, who puts the list together, and is it fungible? Meaning 1 and 2 get done, and now we only have 3 through 9. But wait, another project comes up. Is this an active list, and who determines the list, and how does a project qualify to be on the list, or a project, or whatever that is?
Yeah, the intent is that the list is fluid, it's dynamic, it will be updated as projects become built, they will become ineligible. Also, if projects become funded through any other kind of city means, CIP or grant funded, they would also then become ineligible because it would no longer meet the additionality requirement.
Right.
So staff will be monitoring the list and update it as needed.
Great.
Okay, I heard a motion to approve as written in the staff report.
I'll second the motion.
And I hear a second. I'll call the vote. Okay, that passes 3-0 with 2 commissioners absent. Thank you, everyone. The next item is future agenda items added by the planning commissioners.
The only, I don't know if it's an add-on, but our work plan that went up, I guess, is that going to come from Megan? I'm just curious on, is our work plan coming back to us, or
I
how's that
guess I have a
work?
question. On our consent calendar tonight, wasn't there a consent to move? Was it was it your report or the work plan?
It was the work plan.
Was
It's on the
work
consent
plan
item.
to the city
To
council?
the city council, yeah.
Okay.
Which I thought we did last time.
It's
but
item
we've
6F.
now done it.
6F. Now, I think that was intended to go to the city council on June 11th. Does anybody know that? And I was supposed to go present it to them, but I have a conflict on June 11th.
Sounds like we
Can always nominate
Ms.
Vice
Ryan?
Vice Chair Ryan to, because she's not here, even better.
Okay.
But
That might have, I think I moved that one actually because we didn't have the resolution to go with the agenda report. So
Okay.
I am up that, forwarded that a meeting, I believe. I can check in with the planning commission after tomorrow.
Perfect.
And provide you when that date is, but, yeah.
Okay, that would be great.
But it's not going the next city council, it's going the one after, at least.
The one after.
At least.
I have several Wednesday
August.
commitments, though, so it's a challenge. Chris is not off the hook yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I don't have anything to add. That was a question.
Just to play that out a little bit, we are canceling the June 19th Planning Commission hearing, which would be the second or the third Thursday of the month, right? And we're moving it to June 26th, a special meeting.
Yes.
And I'm not here either. But will the city council hearing occur prior to any next meeting that the commission sounds like it won't meet prior to the city council?
Yeah, I'll double check we were juggling some items on the council, so I don't recall which exactly meeting that's going to, but I'll double check it. I know it wasn't going the 11th though.
Okay. I suppose that could be done in email too, just who's available to go.
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking.
All right, thank you.
in that same context, I've not seen the ad hoc committee on affordable housing get agendized for the city council yet. I don't know if
thought you
that's.
guys did that last week or 2 weeks ago when I was out.
No, that would fall to me.
I
And
left that to you guys to do, and you haven't
I
done
didn't,
it.
well, I wasn't, I thought I had to be agendized before I could just randomly show up. Maybe I just need guidance there. At city council.
I see. The planning commission voted to send it to city council.
That's right, and I'm
Okay.
waiting, I'm just letting you know that I haven't heard back from the agenda yet.
Right.
We can certainly look into that and provide you with an update shortly.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Bob, for doing that. Okay, secretary reports.
I have no reports.
Okay, short and sweet. With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting until the next special planning commission meeting on June 26th, 2025. And with that, good night.